Okay, so the boxes are checked. I know I have a muscle group that needs some extra work. I know that I am exercising correctly. I'm eating, I'm sleeping. I've picked the right exercises. So now I'm ready to address it through training. Where do I start?
The first thing you need to evaluate is how much are you working that muscle? What are your sets? What are your current number of sets? And so I think that a lot of our listeners and subscribers to this probably know this, but maybe it's just worthwhile covering real quickly. Don't just think of just like a workout. Think about the entire week or the entire microcycle. You might be doing 3 sets of biceps as part of your 15 sets that you're doing on Monday, but you're also maybe doing 3 sets of biceps maybe on Friday. So you put those together, you've got 3 and 3 is 6 sets, right? Well, we kind of want to remember those muscle and strength training pyramid, the recommendations, right? We want to kind of get somewhere between 10 and 20. But I feel like first you got to know where you're at before you start changing things and make sure that you have a baseline of what your sets are. So if you have a actual weakness, what are your total sets? And two, we should probably differentiate as well. We don't want to count practice sets and warm-up sets. We got to make sure that we're having a good amount of effort in those sets. So we want to exclude the light warm-up sets you're doing because those aren't enough hard sets. We always want to kind of think of our working sets. Okay, let's add them all up. Let's add them all up the whole week. We got 3 sets on Monday. We got 2 sets on Wednesday, and then we've got 5 sets on Friday. Is it in our range? Then probably start making our changes.
If we look at what informs the number of sets that we should be doing, this comes from research that looks at all the various studies out there on people who are doing resistance training programs. Most of that in the literature, just to control for the effort between groups, is on people training to failure. But we also know that training to failure isn't necessary, so long as there's a sufficient level of effort, a decent RPE, a decent proximity to failure, if you will. Those sets should all quote unquote count. But a weakness of the literature is that if you're doing rows, lat pull downs, or bicep curls, they count them all the same on a 1-to-1 basis when assessing what's an appropriate amount of sets per muscle group. So if we want to be research informed in establishing, well, how many sets am I doing for our biceps? You might think, or you might have heard other, content producers in the bodybuilding space go, oh, I should only count my direct sets, or I should count my, indirect sets like my rows as half a set. But I think we need to be aware that if we want to base like what's a reasonable starting volume or assess your current volume based upon how it relates to what we think is best in the research, just count it all together. But do take note when you're only training a muscle group in sets that are from a compound exercise. This is especially relevant for things like your arms, your biceps and triceps. So yes, maybe you've got 12 sets per week of biceps, and maybe 7 sets of that is actually back work and 5 is arm work. Make note of that. So while it still is quote unquote 12 sets, you want to make sure that you note how many are direct and how many are indirect. And that way we can assess, maybe there is a weakness for X or Y reason. Maybe you're not doing much direct work at all, or maybe it's all indirect. So just keep in mind that we need to take those things into account when we're assessing the number of sets.